Hi, my name is Abigail Downing, and I work as an adjunct professor at Gordon College, and I'm excited to talk to you about preparing students to give teacher feedback and assess student rating. At Gordon College, with the undergraduate students, we use the Writing Revolution 2.0, the most updated version, and it has a lot of really great resources for them on the website, which we'll take a little bit of a look at later. We also talk a lot about the writing rope. It's not a required text, but it is something that they know about through our class discussions and all the pieces of the writing rope that are important for our students to become skilled writers. We use the writing rope more in our graduate program. So I love this quote from the Vermont Writing Collaborative. If you don't know what you're looking for, you won't know how to get there. And I think this is important for our students as we think about writing because it's more than just giving our students, their future students, just open-ended time for writing whatever they feel like writing about. We need to make sure that we are explicitly teaching writing skills and that there is an end product that we have in mind and we are mapping out the skills that we need to explicitly teach along the way to get there. So as we're thinking about the writing process, we want them to know they should give students a model and a rubric right from the start. So that way their students know how they're going to be assessed and what are all the pieces that they should include in their writing. So they could be thinking about this, as they think and gather information, as they plan and organize themselves, as they're writing their draft and revising and editing, they know the expectation. And throughout this process, we also want to make sure there's chances for peer and teacher feedback. So we're talking here about teacher feedback specifically and thinking about how we can support our students in that through different rubrics and checklists. So we want to make sure that they're using the same checklist or rubric to assess, track progress, and create goals for their students. So they can do some kind of beginning of the year benchmark assessment for writing, and then based off of that, meet with students to talk about what are their specific goals. And it might be just creating one goal for the next writing assignment that they're going to do based off of what they need. And then, they can use these resources to track progress all throughout the year and continue to create goals to push themselves to become better and better writers. They're looking for their students' writing structure, coherence in their writing, unity, sentence skills, and then based off of those different things, they can group students for targeted instruction. So, a little bit more specifically about the sentence level skills that they're looking for, they need to know how to teach their students to write complete sentences. So, recognizing if something is a fragment versus a complete sentence, how do you fix a fragment? How do you fix run on sentences? All foundational skills. They also work on how to teach students to expand their sentences, so giving more detail using different question words. So if they write a sentence like, she runs, who is she? Where does she run? Why is she running? All of that will add more detail to their writing. They need to know how to teach their students the four basic sentence types. So they need to make sure that they are confident in them themselves, so that way their students can learn them and use them as topic sentences for paragraphs or to add more variety to their writing. They need to know how to teach using compound and complex sentences. From a young age, students should be writing compound sentences, and this is a great way to also teach additional punctuation marks, like how to properly use a comma in these different kinds of sentences. We also talk about adding appositives to writing. Appositives are something unique about writing. We don't often use them when we're speaking, and so they need to be explicitly taught as a sentence writing skill. So in the sentence, my husband, a school counselor, works at the middle school. A school counselor is the appositive. It's giving more information about the noun right before it. So by learning how to do these in writing, it also will support their reading comprehension because when they come across these types of sentences, they can see those phrases and they know how it works and what it does, and that helps their reading comprehension too. Finally, we want them to make sure that their students are fluent in transcription skills that are so important for writing. So they need to be fluent in their spelling and in their handwriting. If those things are really a struggle for students and they're having to think a lot about them, that inhibits how quickly and efficiently and effectively they can convey their ideas. So it's really important during phonics and handwriting instruction time that students are becoming fluent in those skills. So we also take as much time as possible to look at real student writing. Sometimes we look at examples of writing that I have written just because there are specific errors that I want them to notice. So sometimes controlled practice is good, but we also want to look at real student writing. And it's tricky because sometimes when they see student writing, they get so excited because they see the drawings, they see the handwriting, and they say, "Oh, it's so cute." And it is cute and it's fun. It's fun to read children's writing. But we also want to push them to look at it a little bit deeper. Look beyond just the spelling and the handwriting and think about these other writing skills that they need to have and how we as teachers are going to push them to become the best writers that they can. So for this writing prompt, I rewrote it at the top because it was a little hard to see. It was cut off. Think about a time in your life when you were very happy. Draw a picture and write a story about that very happy time. And this student wrote, "I am happy when I swim." So we can see there are a lot of strengths here. So some of the strengths are knowing when to use capital letters. So they know the beginning of a sentence and the word I are both capitalized. They have ending punctuation. For young learners, these can be a big deal, remembering to start with an uppercase and end with ending punctuation. And also, we can see that they are correctly spelling vowel sounds, digraphs, the word happy. But if we're thinking a little bit more broadly than just spelling and handwriting, we can also see that they wrote a complete sentence. So it has a subject and it has a predicate. So that's great. They're not writing in fragments. That's not a run-on sentence either. So they have that foundational skill. Now thinking about areas to improve, and even professional writers have ways they can improve. So we can see um, right away that there's some letter formation, like the H in when looks a little bit like an N. So working on handwriting, spelling with blends. So in swim, we know it should be SW and not SC, so a phonics skill. The spacing could be a little better. Some words are fairly close together. So those might be things that students initially notice about this writing as things that need to be fixed. But we want to push them to think past just spelling, just how the letters look. What could this student work on that would expand their skills as a writer? And what they could do is expand the sentence. So tell a little bit more about swimming. Where do you like to swim? Who do you like to swim with? I see some other people in the picture with you. So if we're thinking about the next lesson to teach this student, we would want to work on using question words to expand their sentences. They have the foundational skill of writing a complete sentence. There's some spelling, some letter formation skills that they'll also work on during their phonics time. So when we're focusing on writing, let's focus on having them tell more information. So we're going to take a look at some checklists and some rubrics that are based off of resources from the Writing Revolution. So if you go to their website and you click on the book resources at the top, you'll see all these wonderful free resources that your students can also use or you can adapt for your own purposes in your classes. So here is an example of a checklist. This might be too much information for some students. You might only pick some of these areas to focus on. And then throughout the year, add on more pieces that you're checking on to give feedback as the teacher. But giving students these questions to answer so they can be looking for what you're looking for is very helpful so they can check and make sure they have all these pieces. And then this is an example of a rubric that we've adapted for you all that addresses topic sentences, detail sentences, concluding sentence, spelling, syntax, and conventions. And you can see along the top there are different categories. So for an exemplar writing, skilled writing, proficient writing, targeted instruction needed. So that's great for us to know as teachers that, we want to be pulling them for a small group in one of these areas. Continue to provide instruction or provide instruction or intervention. So let's take a look at an older example with some longer writing. This is still the same prompt. So think about a time in your life when you were very happy. Draw a picture and write a story about that very happy time. The handwriting is very small, so I typed it again for all of us to see a little bit easier, but I kept the same spelling and punctuation that they used in their original writing. In my life, when I was very happy is when I went to Ethiopia with my family to visit my family there. But I didn't know anyone there and it was weird. Then I played with the children and I got used to them. Then at my house, they come for a sleepover every day to support us for cooking and learn the environment there because we live in a different state. Then all of us came to my grandmother's house. We had a sleepover at my grandmother's house and the best day ever. So if we were using this checklist to give feedback to a student, we could check off yes or no. Do they have these different pieces that we're looking for and make some additional comments? So yes, there is a topic sentence here. In my life, when I was very happy is when I went to Ethiopia with my family. It directly answers the question about a very happy time. They just need to edit the word order. Does it have a concluding sentence? No, but they do talk about best day ever, which I think is tying into the very happy time of the prompt. So if they expand on the best day ever and make it its own sentence, then they could have a conclusion sentence there. Does this writing sample contain complete sentences? Yes. Does it contain run-ons? Yes, sentences 5 and 6. So if editing run-on sentences is something that they have been explicitly taught, then the student could go in and edit this themselves, or they may need some support with it. Does this sentence contain fragments? Yes. So sentences 2 and 3 are fragments, and so if they know how to fix a fragmented sentence, then they could edit this on their own. If they don't, it's something that they'll need, small group support with. Does this sentence contain complex sentences? So it's asking specifically about conjunctions. So yes, it has some conjunctions. There is a compound sentence in there, but they could use more variety with their conjunctions, so using more than just and. Does their paragraph contain detail sentences, at least 3? Yes, it does. Does it have transitional words? Yes, but they use then over and over again, so another place where they could have some more variety in their writing. Do they stay on topic? Yes. Does it contain relevant details? Also, yes. Perhaps the part where it talks about I didn't know anyone and it was weird. It's still talking about the best day ever, or a very happy time, sorry. So it's part of the topic, but it's not the most relevant detail because we're trying to talk about a really happy time, and talking about feeling weird and not knowing anyone doesn't really fit with it being a happy time. So that might be something that was true, but not something that we want to include in the story if we're trying to tell people it was a very happy time. Does this contain repetitions? No, it doesn't. So this is one way you could give feedback to a student. Let's look at this same piece of writing with the rubric. So if you were assessing and evaluating it as a teacher. So sorry, something else to think about that we push our students to think about too is after evaluating the writing with a checklist or a rubric, what would we teach this student next? So they are still working on some foundational skills of writing complete sentences that aren't fragments and are not run-on sentences. So we'd want to address that first. Then they could focus on using some more variety in their sequence transition words, and then move on from other skills from there. So there are lots of goals for this student, but we don't want to give a lot of goals all at once, all the possible goals, but fixing the fragments would be first, then working on fixing run-on sentences, then how can we change the sequence transition words to add more variety. So let's look at this same piece of writing with the rubric now. So if you were using this as an assessment, maybe also for a grade, how would we assess these different sections? So for the topic sentence, this would be a 3. So proficient writing, the topic sentence is a general statement that introduces the topic and addresses the prompt. The word choice is functional. That's all true, looking at the content of the topic sentence. Are the conventions perfect? Is the grammar perfect? No, but that's going to be addressed in a different part of the rubric. So we're thinking about the content here. Now thinking about the details where they talk about playing with other children, having a sleepover, visiting their grandmother's house. The details do not all of them, clearly support the topic sentence. Some lack clarity, focus, accuracy, and or development. So they could have added a little bit more, made it clear how playing with the children made it a happy time, or adding clarity to the run-on sentences. Some of the ideas are melding together in a confusing way. Then it talks about how details lack variety of sentence structures. That's true. It's mostly simple sentences here. They could have used more variety. The part about it not being sequenced in logical order, that's not true for this story. This is sequenced in a logical order, but many of these other components are true for this piece of writing. And then finally, the word choice is simple. Looking at the concluding sentence, we would say it's absent or incomplete. They have, the best day ever. It's getting there. They're trying to wrap it up in a way that's connecting to it being a very happy time, but it could be its own true, complete sentence. Now, thinking about spelling, we see there's lots of spelling errors here. You could do a more in-depth analysis of this, especially with more of a phonics focus, but there are many times where they are adding silent E's where they don't need it, but oftentimes they are hearing the sounds and using the incorrect spelling for it. Like if you look at the word used, like I used to do that, we know that ed sounds like t there, and then U, the long U sound there does have the U, so we can see why they chose a Y and a U, but they're not correctly following all the right spelling patterns. So spelling errors indicate underdeveloped awareness of phoneme sequence or identity. Now, when we're thinking about syntax, you can look more in depth at the Massachusetts standards to see more specifically for this grade level what is expected of them. But something to keep in mind is that linguistic variation due to dialect should not be considered an error. So you can read more on this rubric yourself to see exactly everything that's spelled out there. But we know that students need to have syntactic awareness of their own dialect and how it's different from academic English, which is what we are teaching in these writing responses. This is more formal academic English here. So we'd want to hold them accountable to learning those skills and practicing them in their writing. But using a different dialect is not something that should be considered an error. Now, finally, looking at conventions. This paragraph demonstrates a lack of control of conventions. We can see that punctuation is used, like ending punctuation is used in places that don't make sense. We're missing commas. The capitalization isn't where it is supposed to be. So there's a lack of control of conventions, and frequent errors make comprehension difficult. So the first time that I read this with the ending punctuation being in wrong places, it was a little bit confusing, but having practiced it, I was able to read it. For you also, maybe it made more sense. But the first time reading this on your own, it is a bit confusing because you're trying to figure out where phrases actually and ideas actually really end. So we also want to look at these types of skills. So analyzing student writing with checklists and with rubrics with more than just one student at a time. So we might start with one student sample, but we also need to apply this to what if you have a classroom of students. So this is another place where we reach out to teachers to collect some examples so that students can have practice sorting a whole class's worth of writing on the same topic, on the same prompt. So they can sort it based off of aspects of the rubric and the checklist, and then further analyze the writing in each group so they can plan a lesson based on what those students need next. So perhaps they're looking through and just sorting by students who have all the components of the paragraph, students who are missing some, students who don't really have many at all and almost need to rewrite it. Or maybe they wrote about the wrong topic, they didn't answer the prompt. So based off of those general groupings, you can look even more in detail and plan further lessons. So this is something that we practice with students as well, and will help prepare them to be excellent teachers of writing in their classrooms. So I hope this was helpful for you all. Through these resources, we're able to help our students explicitly teach their future students how to be better writers and to give specific feedback to help them develop their writing skills.